Welcome, dear Dharma brothers and sisters, to our Path to Awakening series with our Venerable Khenpo Tenzin. We will begin our teachings this morning in our Yellow Garchen Institute prayer book on page 1. All mother sentient beings, limitless as space, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be free from suffering, and swiftly may they attain precious, unsurpassed, perfectly complete enlightenment. All mother sentient beings, limitless as space, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be free from suffering, and swiftly may they attain precious, unsurpassed, perfectly complete enlightenment. All mother sentient beings, limitless as space, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be free from suffering, and swiftly may they attain precious, unsurpassed, perfectly complete enlightenment. For that purpose, until I attain Buddhahood, I will apply my body, speech, and mind to virtue. Until death, I will apply my body, speech, and mind to virtue. From today until this time tomorrow, I will apply my body, speech, and mind to virtue. I take refuge in the Buddhas until I attain the essence of awakening. Likewise, I take refuge in the Dharma and in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. Just as the Buddhas of the past gave rise to bodhicitta and progressed along the Bodhisattva's path, so shall I give rise to bodhicitta for the benefit of all beings and practice the stages of the Bodhisattva's path. I take refuge in the Buddhas until I attain the essence of awakening. Likewise, I take refuge in the Dharma and in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. Just as the Buddhas of the past gave rise to bodhicitta and progressed along the Bodhisattva's path, so shall I give rise to bodhicitta for the benefit of all beings and practice the stages of the Bodhisattva's path. I take refuge in the Buddhas until I attain the essence of awakening. Likewise, I take refuge in the Dharma and in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. Just as the Buddhas of the past gave rise to bodhicitta and progressed along the Bodhisattva's path, so shall I give rise to bodhicitta for the benefit of all beings and practice the stages of the Bodhisattva's path. Until awakening, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. Until awakening, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. Until awakening, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as space, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they not be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as space, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they not be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as space, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they not be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. An infinite array of worlds, each with 4 continents and the wealth of infinite oceans of realms. If I bring them all to mind and offer them without exception, please hold with compassion all the beings they contain. My body, enjoyments, and whatever I own, my aggregates, elements, and sense sources, my aspirations now and in times to come, as well as everything I grasp as mine. By offering them all may I be blessed with the end of self-grasping. Completely liberated from the bounds of real and unreal, transcending the names and concepts of arising, cessation, and abiding, coming and going, affirmation and denial. The supreme mandala is the natural state. By offering it, may I be blessed to attain the state of Buddhahood. Om Guru Deva Dakini Ratna Mandala Pratishta Swaha. Namo. To the Guru, the utter purity of all appearance and existence, I offer all appearance and existence arisen as the primordial ground. I supplicate you, may the three realms be completely liberated. Please grant blessings to empty samsara from its depths. Lord, with 5 omniscient wisdoms, crown ornament, kind one with loving nature, precious protector of beings, heart of all Buddhas, inexpressible by words or thought, I supplicate you from the core of my mind. Bless me from within the state of dharmata. Bless me to realize this mind primordially pure and unborn as the unfathomable dharmakaya. Please turn the wheel of the dharma of the greater and lesser vehicles, and the teachings common to both according to the dispositions and mental capacities of sentient beings.
Tangue do je rezon ro je ma do je bonjon ba so je lumbo da ver je ga cha je ba ja dong go jan za do je jan je de lo na ro da ma pa ma la je gam bo pa mo de ba ja wan do gong ba ga je la ma nan je da jo je da nan ra dam je da la ma la bo la ye je so la zo yon de nyam zo nga la ba Dende donjen de begele zo dogya lo chizan do warazin jalab do zo jalam dan do warazin jalab do zo lan chowa ze warazin jalab do chowa yi chizan ja warazin jalab do zo chinjen zo wala ma ju ja go zo do ja san da da ge ju lambe da ge dem ba dan zin jen ja don ja jen bon do warazin jalab do zo or dear Dharma brothers and sisters, usually we are in the samsara, but according to this precious human life, we have opportunity to Dharma practice. Dharma practice through body, speech, and mind. We have to generate bodhicitta, or when you listen Dharma, you should think listen Dharma is for the sake of all mother sentient beings. Mother means you should love them. And I'm listening Dharma for you, like that. You think. And then when you listen Dharma, if you listen carefully, and this is very great path to meditation. This is then your mind completely dissolve into the teaching. So then many thoughts just automatically disappear. This is the first thing we have to do, and then today we will discuss the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths are the truth of suffering, the truth of origin of suffering, the truth of the path, and the truth of the cessation. Why do we call them noble truth? They are noble truths because the Arya, you know, right, in Sanskrit, Arya, or holy sublime beings, and the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and Arhats know these truths. They know the reality of suffering. They know that suffering is their real suffering, and that the cause of suffering is the real cause of suffering, and that the path is the truth path, and that the cessation is the real cessation. But samsaric beings don't know. What knowing means, what not knowing means is we don't know suffering is suffering. For example, if you stay in your room, you have TV, mobile phone, food, drink, and then if someone tells you are suffering, you won't leave them. We accumulate suffering. This is because we don't know what actions create suffering and what thoughts create suffering. Also, we don't know which virtues create happiness, and that happiness is a result of practice. I will tell you briefly of the history of the noble truths. The Four Noble Truths. When Shakyamuni Buddha became enlightened, for the first 49 days, he did not teach. He said, I have realized intrinsic awareness, but if I try to teach, people will not be able to understand. So I will remain silent in the forest. But then the gods made many auspicious offering, like the auspicious offerings, and requested him to teach. So the Buddha taught the first Dharma, which were the Four Noble Truths. Buddha started to teach the Four Noble Truths in Varanasi. Actually, all of the Dharma is included in the Four Noble Truths, because all samsaric activities are included in afflictive emotions and their results. And all Dharma practices that lead to nirvana are included in the truth of path and the truth of cessation. So, in fact, all of samsara and nirvana is contained within the Four Noble Truths. So how did the Buddha begin teaching these Four Noble Truths? Four Noble Truths. He said, first, you should understand suffering. So, how to know suffering? All suffering is included in the three categories of suffering. The suffering of change, and pervasive suffering. The suffering of suffering is, for example, when you have a headache and then your stomach starts to hurt. This is a simple example. Another example is you lose a loved one and then you lose your life. Or we lose our grandparent, grandfather, and then our grandmother dies. Usually a headache or the feeling of being sick. This kind of thing, even animals realize is suffering. So therefore, they have a lot. They also have the wish to liberate it from sickness. And then all living beings, especially us human beings, as ordinary people, we are all scared of disease and suffering. For that reason, everybody tries to liberate themselves from suffering. They try to liberate themselves from suffering, but in the process they create suffering. Because as they try to liberate themselves, how they are looking, acting, and thinking, all of it is related to self-grasping. And everything is dependent on their ignorance. So then they accumulate karma by acting out of attachment and aversion. As Shantideva said, samsaric beings wish to liberate it from suffering, but they run towards it. Then the suffering of change comes from being attached to temporary happiness. This temporary happiness occurs through afflictive emotions. Sometimes it seems everything is okay, and then slowly we lose that feeling. Slowly our mind becomes lost in being busy, especially with sadness or uncomfortable feeling like aversion or jealousy or another kinds of suffering. And then it will start to sink into suffering. For example, if you have some food for lunch and dinner and you just stay at home and you don't prepare for the next day and you eat, At lunchtime, you eat lunch. At dinner time, you eat dinner. And then tomorrow morning, you don't have breakfast. There are many examples. Sometimes we eat some food. It is delicious and leaves a good taste on our tongue. But then slowly it changes into suffering. It causes stomach ache, stomach ache, or diarrhea, or some other kind of suffering. The third category is all pervasive suffering. This is the hardest one to understand, and it is actually rooted in a sense of equanimity, not of gross suffering and not of pleasure, but all pervasive suffering is the cause of suffering and the suffering of change. The reason we call it all pervasive suffering is because it provides all of our feelings. It provides our entire body from head to feet. And it provides our temporary happiness and suffering. It also provides our mind. It is the underlying source of all of our suffering. So now, samsaric sentient beings, especially samsaric human beings, we first try to liberate ourselves from the suffering of suffering, and the suffering of change. And if we want to liberate it, then first we need to know how we are suffering. To give an example, in poorer countries, people suffering from lack of food. They suffer from lack of water, clothes, or good facilities. But in developed countries, they have nice material things. Internally, though, they have mental pressure, anxiety, especially anxiety that arises from competition. And sometimes they make plans to create something wonderful, but sometimes there is no enough time, or sometimes they don't have enough skill, or sometimes not enough workers, and then they have lots of worries. So not just countries, but also individuals get caught in suffering. Some suffering from lack of knowledge. They would like to do something, but they don't know how to do it. Others have good knowledge, but they use it in the wrong way. And then their knowledge becomes a cause of suffering. So, as the Buddha said, we have to understand suffering. Understanding does not only mean that you feel suffering and know that you are suffering. You also have to understand something else in addition, which is how to liberate yourself from suffering. You have to know this in order to purify. Purifying your suffering means you know what is you need to give up. This is very important. Some people think, oh, suffering is just occurs within this life. And then in the next life, there is no suffering. If this were true, then the Buddha would not say you should practice. Maybe the Buddha would say you should try to die since you were born in this world. He might say that if after we die there is happiness, why did the Buddha not say that? Because in the next life, if we go through the bardo, there are lots of fear, terrors, scary experience. Even when you see Yidam deities, you will be scared. If we compare our present experience with the bardo, now if we see some wrathful tankas, deities, we are not afraid. If we don't faith in them, then we are not afraid. We just think, oh, it is funny or something like that. But in the bardo, when they appear, you are scared involuntarily. And then in the hell realm, how much suffering is there? Of heat and cold. And then hunger ghost realm, how much suffering of thirst and hungry and so on. And animal realms, how much they are suffering because of losing their freedom. They can't even move to a nice place freely. And then demigods. You can see how much the demigods suffer. When you give rise to jealousy in your mind, are you happy? If not, know that the demigods have many times more suffering. Because their cause for a rebirth in the demigod realm is jealousy. For example, right now we have been reborn in the human realm. On one hand, we have been reborn here because of good karma. On the other hand, we are born in the human realm because of attachment. We cannot even throw a pair of new socks in the trash. Why? Even if we throw them away, we are still attached. If we lose a ring, we are unhappy, right? This happy this happens because we are reborn in the human realm due to attachment. And then in the God realm, it's the same. The main afflictive emotion is pride. If you have pride, then you always try to have a higher status. But if you don't have that, you are unhappy. In particular, when before the God's day, their family and friends reject them. They do not respect them. And then they are unhappy. That shows they have prayed. So the main thing to understand about suffering is that we have to know it is the object to purify. The object to give up. It is not an object to keep. It is not an object to utilize. But if we are going to purify these sufferings, then first we have to purify the cause of suffering or the origin of suffering. So the second noble truth, the suffering of origin, has two divisions. The origin of karma, the origin of afflictive emotions. The origin of afflictive emotion is made up of attachment, anger, and ignorance. And the root of these three is ignorance. Then the root of karmic origin is the action of these three afflictive emotions. How this occurs is that first the root of samsara, which is ignorance, obscures our wisdom, Dharma wisdom, Buddha nature. And then we cannot see what is suffering. What is the cause of suffering? And we also cannot see what is the path and what is the liberation. And that is why then we give rise to attachment and aversion. And then we say, this mine, and I, and you, and yours. These kind of thinking arise. And according to this thinking, then we create non-virtues spontaneously. So we are acting through afflictive emotions that we know these karmic origin and origins of afflictive emotion. Their result are suffering. And then while we are suffering, still we create extra suffering. For example, when we are suffering, we are unhappy, and that creates the conditions for more suffering. For instance, if you have a headache and somebody says something and you are suddenly angry, then when you are angry, then you accumulate non-virtues. So that's why we say samsara is endless. Because we accumulate the cause of samsara endlessly. The reason is our ignorance. This is very important to know. In brief, suffering comes from afflictive emotions, and then we act over afflictive emotions, we accumulate karma. That is what we call the origin of karma or karmic origin. So in this samsara, wherever we go, we think, oh, if I become rich, then we become rich and we have good food and good drinks and nice things. But then our mind is filled with extra sufferings. We are worried about losing our positions, and we engage in competitiveness. And then sometimes after we become rich, we think, oh, these poor people are so happy. Often people say this. Even monastics say this. For example, before in some remote place, there were some monastics. At that time, they ate only champa and tea in the sun with no cushions or chairs. And that's all. But they stayed there and talked to each other, sometimes joking with each other and saying funny things. But then slowly times changed. People, even monastics, have no time to stay together long. Everybody is busy. And then they say, oh, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we did this, we did that, and we were so happy. Of course, we didn't have much food, but still we were so happy. They say that. But at that time, they did not feel so much happiness. That is true because still they had suffering. At that time, they look forward up towards gaining a great reputation, maybe. And everybody is same. So if you want to give up suffering, then you should give up the cause of suffering. Giving up the cause of suffering works like that. If you purify your anger, then you will not act out of your anger. And if you do not act out of your anger, you will not have that karma. If you do not have that karma, then you will not have its result. If you purify your jealousy, then you will not act out of your jealousy, then you don't have that karma and it is result. So we think, meditate on this teaching of the Buddha, and that will have a very great result. It was for that reason that the Buddha first taught the Four Noble Truths in Saranati or Varanasi. Saranata or Varanasi, one place, different names. And he had only 5 students or Sangha, only 5 Sangha. Step by step, Buddha taught each truth, each week or so, and his student meditated, practiced in the forest, and asked Buddha questions. and then slowly they become noble sanghas. They were noble beings because they knew these Four Noble Truths from the Buddha. As I said, suffering occurs because of afflictive emotions. Afflictive emotions arise out of ignorance. But then when you act from them, why do they create suffering? This is very important to know. The reason is that they combine with grasping. They combine with grasping, and grasping perceives everything as truly existing. For example, this is good, this is true. This is bad, this is my enemy. You truly think all this exists, right? You think this person was my grandparents' enemy, and then you harbor resentment. So the mind is like water, and grasping freezes it. So finally, it comes down to grasping. Like when we are angry, we think there is an enemy. For example, this year, you and another person are each other's enemies. But then through practicing the Dharma or some reason like that, the next year you guys become friends. So that means enemies are not truly existing. Enemies are delusion. Nagarjuna said, first one is loyal to oneself, I. Then slowly we become attached to ourselves. This attachment is so hard to identify, hard to understand. It is like salt dissolved into water. It is very difficult to single out. And then the problem is, we don't care about our attachment to ourselves. We just act from it. So sometimes we say that everything is our mind. Because externally things truly exist, not a single object. This is a story I am not quite sure it's true, but it is pretty funny and suitable. So I will tell it. It took place probably between 1940 and 1950 when I was there. Just kidding. We are not at that time, right? This is in Tibet. The first English person came to Tibet. As he came over the mountain, the nomadic people had never seen a foreign person before. And when they saw this English person, they thought he was a ghost, not a person. And then they were scared. And they said, oh, this seems like black magic. And Tibetan people sometimes clap their hands together to repel black magic. They thought he was not a real human because they thought all human beings seemed like only Tibetan face, maybe, especially nomadics. They did not see different people before because they had thoughts. They have thoughts. So they clapped their hands, and then this English person thought that they were, how to say, applauding him, because they were happy to see him, and he was happy, and then they become friends. So that is because of mind, right? Everything is mind. If he knew the Tibetans acted, that was because they thought he was a kind of black magic, then he would be upset or angry. There was no reason for him to be happy. But the mind perceives reasons that are not there. So that means that all objects don't truly exist. Whether this story is true or not, when we have an identification with solidity, and then we start to kill others out of aversion, or we lie for the sake of attachment, or things like that, then that is how samsara unfolds. So, in brief, if you are going to purify suffering, you should know what is suffering. The suffering of change, the suffering of suffering, all pervasive suffering. They all come from afflictive emotions. And afflictive emotions do not work by themselves. Through ignorance, they are combined with the egoistic mind. And we give rise to solid perceptions. If we know that, then the aspiration to purify the suffering arises in us, right? So after knowing the suffering, then we have to purify them. But we cannot purify the suffering by saying, oh, sometimes they will leave. They will not just leave sometime or any other time. So then we should start to practice to liberate it from these. So then on the truth of the path, we start to practice. The truth of path is the origin or cause of cessation. So we start, for example, with meditation. We practice on the path of accumulation, the 4 applications of mindfulness. These are the essential recollection of a body, the essential recollection of a feeling, the essential recollection of mind, and the essential recollection of phenomena. And then we practice the 4 right exertions, which are to avoid giving rise to non-virtues, attributes, to abandon the non-virtues that we already have, to give rise to virtues, qualities, and avoid letting the virtues, qualities. We already have mm, degenerated, degenerate, degenerate. And then we engage in the four lamps of miracles, which are the miracles of aspiration, the miracles of effort, the miracles of contemplation, and the miracles of analysis. So we engage these 12 practices to gathering merit on the path of accumulation. And then on the path of joining, we practice the 5 purified negative powers, which are the cognitive power of faith, the cognitive power of effort, the cognitive power of mindfulness, the cognitive power of meditative stabilization, the cognitive power of wisdom. We also practice the 5 powers, which are the faith, diligence, mindfulness, samadhi, and wisdom. And then during the path of insight or the path of seeing, we practice the 7 branches of enlightenment, which are pure state of mindfulness, pure state of practice, perfect discrimination of the Dharma, pure state of effort, pure state of joy, pure state of suppleness, pure state of concentration, and pure state of equanimity. And then then on the path of meditation, we practice the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path is right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, and right samadhi. These particulars of the 5 paths I have taught in detail previously. But in short, through this practice, one by one, that the realizations of paths arise. In brief, during the path of practice, our biggest responsibility is not only to try to liberate ourselves, but to liberate all mother sentient beings. And not only liberate them within samsara, for example, liberate them from the lower realms into the higher realms. Not only that, through it is important that we help this way, but the main thing is we all become enlightened. That's why we practice the 6 perfections. We practice generosity for others without any expectation for oneself. And keep discipline, be patient, be diligent, meditate, and practice with wisdom. All dharma are included in the 6 paramitas. So, from generosity to wisdom, they are all included in wisdom and method. The great method of compassion and the great wisdom of emptiness. Practicing the paramitas also helps to achieve 2 kayas. The nirmana kaya for the sake of others, and for oneself, the Dharmakaya. And then we have a question. If we practice through the paths, the path of accumulation, the path of joining, the path of seeing, path of meditation. Could we purify afflictive emotions? Yes, because there is the truth of cessation. The truth of cessation is the result of purifying. It sees the afflictive emotions and the cause of afflictive emotions. If we cut the root of suffering, then it will not grow again. Similarly, if we purify the root of afflictive emotions, they will never occur again. We can do this because afflictive emotions are temporary, and ignorance is also temporary. It is like clouds in the sky. No matter how thick they are temporary. They will disappear momentarily if the wind blows. In the same way, if we practice through these paths, we can purify the cause of suffering and the origin of suffering. And then suffering will never again remain in our minds. To go a little further, each truth has 4 aspects. So in total, there are 16 aspects. For example, the first truth is truth of suffering. It has 4 aspects. First is impermanence. Second is the suffering. The third is emptiness, and the fourth is selflessness. I already mentioned that truth here means that the Aryas or noble practitioners, they look at relative truth and they see this is true. From the relative perspective, so suffering is impermanent. But we can have wrong view about suffering itself. Sometimes we have a problem acknowledging that suffering is suffering. For example, if you travel to a nice place and you see nice and experience a gentle breeze and you listen to lovely music through your headphones, if at that moment I tell you that this is suffering, you will not believe it. That means you don't know it is suffering. Then how can I introduce that they are suffering? If you listen to lovely music and you are completely absorbed in it, then suddenly your music player dies, then you are suffering. So this is the suffering of change. So you recognize the feeling of suffering, but the paradox is that you don't know that those things you enjoy are suffering. So Buddha said you should know suffering. Actually, you know the feeling of suffering, but you think it is permanent. You don't directly say it is permanent, but you identify your suffering as permanent. That's why, because of some small sufferings, some people commit suicide, give up all of their life. They threw away their life, and they make a big mistake. So we have to know that this feeling of suffering is impermanent. Sooner or later, it will disappear because it is temporary, like ice melting into water in spring. Behind our stupa, there is a point. In January and February, every morning it becomes ice. I break it for the birds and the deer. If the pond is covered in ice, they cannot drink from it. So I break the ice every morning, but by afternoon, the piece of ice have all melted. That means the water is real, but the piece of ice are temporary. So when we are suffering through body, speech, and mind, we have to think about impermanence of these suffering. And then whatever you own or the facilities you use, whatever good things you have, they are all suffering. Because depending on them, you give rise to attachment and aversion. Let me make one thing clear. If you use these things to accumulate merit, like right now, we are using this microphone to give a Dharma teaching. It is impermanent. It is still included in the truth of suffering, and it is also included in the cause of suffering. But we can transform it into a support of merit. That is virtue. Our body is the same. We take care of our body lovingly, but it brings us suffer. That we know. But then, why do we say it brings suffering? Who needs to know that? Ordinary sentient beings. We don't know our body is suffering. That's why I said that, right? For example, this body is not pure, not clean, but we think it is pure and clean. For instance, we cannot empty the public garbage without wearing gloves. That means we think our hands are very clean. And then we think our body is very clean and it is very important. But then reality of this body is impermanence, established by blood, pulse, and so on. And then it is selflessness. Actually, we identify this body as self. For example, our body, but it is selflessness. In the Dharma, it says we give essence to essenceless things. We think unclean things are clean. We attribute a self to selfless thing. We project permanence on the impermanent things. That we are bound by the rope of delusion. That's why the Buddha introduced as the four aspects of the truth of suffering: impermanence, suffering, emptiness, and selflessness. Through practicing them, which we call the path, and we will liberate it, which is called cessation. To clarify, the empty aspects doesn't signify the nature of emptiness. It means you think this is clean, but this is not clean. It is empty of being clean. And then you think this is self, but it is not self. These observations are related to the four applications of mindfulness that we practice during the path of accumulation. In the four applications of mindfulness, first, you reflect and look from your head to your feet for the I. You ask, where is I? And you find there is no I. You cannot find I, and then you cannot find anything permanent. Each and every part of your mind, body is impermanent. Then you practice and practice. Then slowly, with mindfulness of feeling, you figure out that feeling are suffering. Second, the four aspects of the truth of the origin of suffering are cause, origin of all, production, and condition. Why are these four aspects mentioned? For what reason? The first cause is mentioned because some think that suffering just appears. They may not think that suffering is permanent, but they don't know, but it is connected with cause. That's why this truth is called the cause of suffering. Suffering comes from the cause of suffering. When we know this, we know karma. It helps us to understand the karma. This cause of suffering includes of all sufferings, not just one suffering. It is not the origin of only one suffering. That is the cause of all suffering means that if we don't give up this cause of suffering, then suffering will occur continually. Suffering does not come without a cause. And suffering comes not because some is punishing us. Perhaps we think Lord of Death, He created this suffering. That, for example, our death is created by the Lord of Death. No, it occurs from the cause. And the cause I already mentioned, right? The afflictive emotions, and then this cause also has conditions. What are conditions? For instance, if we plant the seed of flower, the seed is the cause of the flowers, and the conditions are water, warmth, and dirt, and so on. So the cause is the condition to ripen all suffering. This is why the second aspects is called the origin of all. As I already mentioned, whenever we have the cause of suffering, then suffering continually happens. So what we have to know here is that suffering is a result, and it comes from a cause. If we introduce these grossly, in this life our actions come from afflictive emotions, and these karma in imprint this these make in imprint, and these imprints get stronger and stronger because we continually do these things. This is the nature. If we accumulate virtue continuously, it has power, it is strong. If we accumulate non-virtue continuously, it also has power, it is strong. That's why we say the afflictive emotions of this life are the cause of the suffering of our next life. If in this life we accumulate anger, anger is a source of unhappiness, harmful motivation, harmful feeling. So then a similar result occurs. Harmful fruits occur in the next life, in the hell realm or other realms. That's why we call the second truth Kunjong. Kunjong is Tibetan. In English it says origin. The afflicted activities of this life are the cause of all other realms. This part is very important. So, practice means activities, right? Activities. So, what we say, what we think, and what we do, if we do them the way of Dharma practice, then in the other realm we will be no suffering. Then in English this is called the growth of suffering. This life with the afflictive activities. Since in this life we accumulate negative karma, like for example we accumulate lots of pride, then it results in rebirth in the God realm. And if we accumulate a lot of jealousy, it results in rebirth in the demigod realm. If we accumulate lots of attachment, we are reborn in the human realm. If we accumulate lots of ignorance, it results rebirth in animal realm. If we accumulate greed, this results in rebirth in the hunger ghost realm. If we accumulate lots of anger, this results in rebirth in the hell realm. So that's how the result of afflicted emotions of this life continually grow into other realms. So this is a cause and a condition. As I already mentioned, we have to know this. This is very important. The origin of suffering and suffering are the interdependence, and cause and effect of samsara. That is the number one thing we have to know at this point. So in brief, samsara is the result of origin, afflictive emotion. No, there's no question everybody would like to be liberated from suffering. Nobody needs a single bit of suffering. And if we do not need suffering, do we have a path to liberation or not? Yes, there's truth of path and the truth of cessation. In this case, cessation is nirvana. We understand what is nirvana. Then the path is the path of liberation from suffering. The truth of a path also has 4 aspects. The first aspect is the path, the way to liberation. You might think, oh, if I try to liberate myself from the sorrow of samsara, I have a path. So this is the path. And the second aspect is called achievement. Achievement is knowing that if we go on this path is a right way. It is a good path. We call achieve a state of emptiness, happiness. The stage of Buddhahood. So that's what the path means. It means the way to get nirvana or to go to a pure land or arrive at happiness. And then this path is excellent. The third aspect is Rigpa or awareness. Rigpa means this path is the antidote of afflictive emotions, the antidote to suffering. How do we know? We have to gain that knowledge through practice. As I already mentioned, through practicing the 4 applications of mindfulness, the 4 samadhis, and the 5 powers. In a way, we meditate, practice, and then we can conquer all the afflictive emotions. That's why this aspect is awareness. And then that 4th aspect is called definite renunciation. Definite renunciation means it brings us from suffering, it delivers us from suffering, and moves us to the Buddha's stage. That's why this aspect is called definite renunciation. Actually, this awareness, so these are the 4 aspects of the truth of cessation. The reason we have to know these aspects is that they are like good doctors. If they are good doctors and we are sick, we have to listen to them. So that's why the truth of the path is for practicing. The truth of suffering is for understanding. The truth of the origin of suffering points out in object to give up. And the truth of cessation has also arisen in our mind. The truth of cessation also has 4 aspects. The first is cessation. it sees suffering and the cause of suffering, or it is the result of giving up suffering through on the path. So that's where we say cessation. Then the second aspect is peace, like peaceful, because it is the result of giving up suffering. That is why it is peaceful. Then the third aspect is called excellent, because after we give up the cause of suffering, then the opposite of suffering, happiness, arises. This happiness excellent, higher. And then the fourth aspect is renunciation. It is the certainty of release. Relax. Yeah, relaxation. Thank you. Because when cessation arises in our mind, we no longer need to worry about rebirth in samsara. If we take rebirth in samsara for the sake of mother sentient beings, this is a special circumstance. Otherwise, we have freedom, so that's why this aspect is called renunciation. Cessation is a little hard to understand. So, to put it simply, cessation is the result of your separation from suffering. Your separation from samsara, and then once you separate from samsara, then you have a feeling or a result which is peaceful. And then that is excellent means that after you purify afflictive emotions and imprints of afflictive emotions, and when you separate from self-grasping, then you are very clean. Even your mind is clean, so your body and speech are all clean. They are clean like a glass without any dirt. And then the certainty of liberation is that naturally bliss, joy, happiness arise. And this happiness is not impermanent. So this is in always unchanging thing. So these are the 16 divisions or aspects of the Four Noble Truths. So some aspects are pretty similar, but they are a little different. We can still make further classification. There are more, but in the Sutara there are 16 divisions presented. The Four Noble Truths can also be understood in two divisions: samsaric cause and effect, which is for giving up, and the cause and the effect of nirvana, which for adopting. And as I have emphasized through the Four Noble Truths, we have to know the reality of karmic cause and effect. So you will have mundane perfect view. When someone has mundane perfect view, that means that person accepts karma. Then that person has mundane good view. Then what is karma Actually, karma means action. This is very important to know. And there are three kinds of action: the action of body, the action of speech, and the action of mind. If your action is positive, the result is happiness, joy. That's where we call virtues. If your action is negative, the result is suffering. That's where we call it bad karma. If you accumulate bad karma, then if you don't confess it, sooner or later you will experience a negative fruition. That means karma never betrays you. Then if you accumulate good karma, the result is virtue. That means good karma never betrayed you. So there are two divisions of karma: good karma and bad karma. So these are two basic divisions of karma. There are three characteristics of karma ripening. First is the infallibility of karmic result. The second is increasing of karmic result. The third is karmic result will not ripen without a cause. Sorry. I will share a story about the infallibility of karmic result with you. Masters often share this story when we studied Dharma. When the Buddha was alive, there was an ordained monk named Gelong Zangdi. He had become an ordained monk in front of the Buddha. And then he practiced, and at last he became an arhat. But his body was very, very ugly. Sorry. And he looked very, very bad. At that time, people would say that if you saw him before lunch, then you could not eat any food because he was so ugly. And then if you saw him right after eating food, you would vomit. So he was extremely ugly. But his voice was so amazing. Even wild animals, when they heard his voice, they were transfixed. They could not leave it. They become attached to his voice. So Gelong Zangdi was one of the Buddha's monks. At that time, monks asked village people for food during meal times. They did not keep their own stores of food, right? But people did not give Gelong Zangdi any food. They wouldn't go near him. So the Buddha let him stay in the temple. And other monks went to get food and brought it back to give to him. Every day he would recite Sutara with a melodious voice. One day King Sajar, at that time there are many kings, So King Sajar was leading his armies somewhere to conquer his enemies. And he went by the Buddha's temple where this ardent monk Zangding was reciting sutras. When King Sajar heard him, he was amazed. Even his horse stopped to listen. King Sajar requested the Buddha to allow him to see. The monk who recited so beautifully. The Buddha let him come inside so he could see, and he was shocked. He asked Buddha, "Oh, my Lord Buddha, what happened?" And then the Buddha started to explain Gelong Zangding's karma. His karma was that in a previous life, at the time when another Buddha was in this world, ordained monk Zangding was a worker who helped construct a stupa. And he often said to the sponsor, "Oh, there is no need for a big stupa. A small stupa is good. There is no need for a nice stupa. A simple one is okay." He would say say things like a lot. But then eventually the sponsor let him work on the big stupa, and slowly the stupa became very nice and big. And everything was excellent. And then he regret that he had often said that just a simple stupa was okay. And there was no need for a nice stupa. He deeply regretted as his way of atonement. He just brought a bell. He made a simple bell and hung it near the stupa. Hung. And the bell sound was so sweet. When the wind below its sounds could be heard all around that place and everybody enjoyed the sound. So that's how this one person created two karma. So he had two different kinds of karmic fruition in his life as Gelong Zangdi. Buddha said that. The second is increasing karmic result, karmic fruition. The example here is of a tree which Tibetan call many legs, just to call it. But in Sanskrit it's called Nayadroda. I couldn't find it in dictionary yet in English. If I will found, I will offer you. Nayadroda is a type of tree that has very small seeds. And then this seed has another seed inside, which has still another seed inside. And so its seeds are very, very small, but its branches provide many matters. Matters, right? It's far. Some offered a few small seeds to Buddha, and the result was that for many lives they had great rebirths. For example, they took rebirth as a king, and they took rebirth as a god because during the first results. For example, their life as a king, they accumulated lots of merit. So in their next life, they became even better than a king. There are many stories in Buddha's sutras. And then the third is that if you do not create the karma, then the result will never occur. Or if you confess completely, then that karma will not happen. For example, we are all human beings, but we have different parents. I was born to my parents in this life, but I wasn't born your parents in this life because I did not create that karma. So I will share this story. Once the King Sharpa, his name is King Sharpa, had a minister. The king asked him to take care of his queen, and then he left the kingdom. He went somewhere else. The minister asked the queen how he could help her. The queen said, "I'm going to write the Buddha's teachings, so you can bring me the bark of a tree and ink." At that time, they did not have peppers, maybe. Or pepper made by the bark, right? Tree bark. During Buddha was alive, I think at that time they used a kind of a bar or bark of a tree. Even during the Nagarjuna, he also wrote some tantric teachings on the skin. What is it called? Bark, or you said that? What is called that? Skin of tree, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. So then she asked him to bring the bark of a tree and ink. This minister did not like Buddhism. This is of course, right? It's very possible. Everybody's mind is not same. And he suddenly gave rise to malicious thoughts. He collected the bark of many trees in the kingdom and put it in the queen's quarters. And he prepared to burn them. And then one day he burned them. The queen and some of her attendants had already attained arhatship. Arhatship, they have special skills, physically, actually, of course, mentally. So they could fly through the sky with their miraculous powers. They escaped the fire by flying for a little while through their malicious powers. But then they fell into the fire like butterflies. Butterfly in Tibet has two kinds of butterfly. one is completely white, not white, like a gray. They like fire, not regular butterflies, right? Regular butterflies, they don't like light and fire. Moth. Oh, thank you. Moths. This is moths. Okay, not butterflies. Sorry, that's my mistake. Uh, in the then the yeah. Uh, mm, like moths. Moths. There was an old woman who was a hunchback. Hunchback, right? Who was in attendant of the queen, the lower part. But since she wasn't not in our heart, she did not stay in the queen's quarters. She stayed in a small room in the palace. She ran from the flames, escaping through the sewer peppers. Sewer peppers. Yeah, yes. Pepis, sorry, sewer peppers. Peps. She was the only one of the queen's attendants who survived the fire. Then the Buddha said that the queen and her previous lives, previous wife had been a princess, and her 500 attendants were also her attendant in that life. At that time, there was a Patika Buddha who meditate for a long time. They meditate in the solid place for a long time. First Buddha also did that same thing. They went to him and they asked, are you a human or non-human? Because they stay in the forest for long. The sun effect, wind effect, that's where their skin is totally changed. It seems almost like a wild trees, old trees. So the Patika Buddha did not answer because he did not want to break his meditation. Then the princess and her attendants put a lot of bark around the Patika Buddha and burned him. But one attendant told everyone not do this terrible thing and did not participate in the burning of the Patika Buddha. She had been reborn as the old woman who escaped the minister's fire. So whatever you do, exactly that result will happen. And whatever you do not do, you will not experience the fruition. This is the law of karma. Okay, now I will tell you more about how karma happens. First, there is the direct result. For example, we take another's life. That is a cause that leads to rebirth in the hell realm. Second is the result of the action resembling the cause. We call it side result. This is, for example, if one kills someone, this result one reborn in the hell. And then once that karma has been exhausted, one reborn in other realms. That's the reasons of some other virtue. But because one killed, then one's life is short. some babies just 3 days, 4 days live in this world and then they die. Everything's are dependent with karma. This is the result resembling the cause, or if someone steals someone else's things, then the result resembling the cause is reborn to be reborn in the hungry ghost realm. And when that karma is exhausted, they may be reborn as a human because of some good karma, but still be poor. Yes. The second side result is a fruition of the action similar to the cause. For instance, if someone is very young but still has an interest in killing insects or taking others' lives, or they are very interested in weapons or harming others, all of these are related to their previous karmas. Or some, since young, they have very interesting to meditate, practice. So this is also related to their previous karma, good karma. And then another category of karma, the dominant result, is like being reborn in a place which has lots of natural disasters, lots of suffering, lots of problems that are not only one person or one family's problem, but the problem of all those who live in that place. They all have the same suffering. That is the dominant result. For example, somewhere is very nice, but has very little water or rain or snow. This is also dominant result. Or another place has too much rain, too much flooding, and these kinds of problems. When many numbers of people experience the same suffering, this is what we call the dominant result. There are also two classifications about how karma is accumulated. The first is, for example, you give rise to malicious thought, and then you intentionally act through body or speech, and that activity of body or speech harms others. The second classification is the perform yet not accumulated karma. This is, for example, when we are working and under our feet we kill many insects. This kind of non-virtue is relatively easy to purify. But the non-virtues of the first category of karma are very serious. So it is not very easy to purify them. So you have to make an effort to purify. So all of these, all our actions occur depending on karma, cause and effect. As a result of learning the Four Noble Truths, we should gain a deeper understanding of the relationship of cause and effect. And then we have to better avoid non-virtue and negative actions. And we should naturally feel more enthusiasm to accomplish positive virtues and good karma. That is our responsibility to teaching the teaching for noble truth, listening for noble truths, and reflecting and meditating on there. Okay, thank you very much. and then we will dedicate.
We will close off. We will do closing prayer in our Blue Drikung Kagyu prayer book as we share the prayer of Kuntung Zampo with each other. So Blue Drikung Kagyu prayer book on page 40, the Primordial Buddha Samantabhadra. Ho! Everything, appearance and existence, samsara and nirvana, has a single ground, yet two paths and two fruitions, and magically displays as awareness or unawareness. Through Kuntuzangpo's prayer, may all beings become Buddhas, completely perfected in the abode of the Dharma Dhatu. The ground of all is uncompounded, and the self-arising great expanse beyond expression has neither the name samsara nor nirvana. Realizing just this, you are a Buddha. Not realizing this, you are a being wandering in samsara. I pray that all you beings of the three realms may realize the true meaning of the inexpressible ground. I, Kuntuzangpo, have realized the truth of this ground, free from cause and condition, which is just this self-arising awareness. It is unstained by outer expression and inner thought, affirmation or denial, and is not defiled by the darkness of unmindfulness. Thus this self-manifesting display is free from defects. I, Kuntuzangpo, abide as intrinsic awareness. Even though the three realms were to be destroyed, there is no fear. There is no attachment to the five desirable qualities of sense objects. In self-arising consciousness, free of thoughts, there is neither solid form nor the five poisons. In the unceasing clarity of awareness, singular in essence, there yet arises the display of the five wisdoms. From the ripening of these five wisdoms, the five original Buddha families emerge, and through the expanse of their wisdom, the 42 peaceful Buddhas appear. Through the arising power of the five wisdoms, the 60 wrathful Herukas manifest. Thus the ground awareness is never mistaken or wrong. I, Kuntuzangpo, am the original Buddha of all, and through this prayer of mine, may all you beings who wander in the three realms of samsara realize this self-arising awareness, and may your great wisdom spontaneously increase. My emanations will continuously manifest in billions of unimaginable ways, appearing in forms to help you beings who can be trained. Through my compassionate prayer, may all of you beings who wander in the three realms of samsara escape from the 6 life forms. From the beginning, you beings are deluded because you do not recognize the awareness of the ground. Being thus unmindful of what occurs is delusion, the very state of unawareness and the cause of going astray. From this delusive state comes a sudden fainting away and then a subtle consciousness of wavering fear. From that wavering there arises a separation of self and the perception of others as enemies. Gradually the tendency of separation strengthens, and from this the circle of samsara begins. Then the emotions of the five poisons develop. The actions of these emotions are endless. You beings lack awareness because you are unmindful, and this is the basis of your going astray. Through my prayer may all you beings recognize your intrinsic awareness. Innate unawareness means unmindfulness and distraction. Imputing unawareness means dualistic thoughts towards self and others. Both kinds of unawareness are the basis for the delusion of all beings. Through Kuntuzangpo's prayer, may all you beings wandering in samsara clear away the dark fog of unmindfulness, clear away the clinging thoughts of duality. May you recognize your own intrinsic awareness. Dualistic thoughts create doubt. From subtle attachment to this dualistic turn of mind, dualistic tendencies become stronger and thicker. Food, wealth, clothes, home, and friends, the five objects of the senses and your beloved family, all these things cause torment by creating longing and desire. These are all worldly delusions. The activities of grasping and clinging are endless. When the fruition of attachment ripens, you are born as a hungry ghost, tormented by coveting and desiring, miserable, starving, and thirsty. Through Kuntuzangpo's prayer, may all you desirous and lustful beings who have attachments neither reject longing desires nor accept attachment to desires. Let your consciousness relax in its own natural state, then your awareness will be able to hold its own. May you achieve the wisdom of perfect discernment. When external objects appear, the subtle consciousness of fear will arise. From this fear, the habit of anger becomes stronger and stronger. Finally, hostility comes, causing violence and murder. When the fruition of this anger ripens, you will suffer in hell by boiling and burning. Through Kuntu Zangpo's prayer, may you beings of the 6 realms, when strong anger arises for you, neither reject nor accept it. Instead, relax in the natural state and achieve the wisdom of clarity. When your mind becomes full of pride, there will arise thoughts of competition and humiliation. As this pride becomes stronger and stronger, you will experience the suffering of quarrels and abuse. When the fruition of this karma ripens, you will be born in the God realms and experience the suffering of change and falling to lower rebirths. Through Kuntu Zangpo's prayer, may you beings who develop pride, let your consciousness relax in the natural state. Then your awareness will be able to hold its own. May you achieve the wisdom of equanimity. By increasing the habit of duality, by praising yourself and denigrating others, your competitive mind will lead you to jealousy and fighting, and you will be born in the jealous God realm where there is much killing and injury. From the result of that killing, you will fall into the hell realm. Through Kuntu Zangpo's prayer, when jealousy and competitive thoughts arise, do not grasp them as enemies. Just relax and ease, then consciousness can hold its own natural state. May you achieve the wisdom of unobstructed action. By being distracted, careless, and unmindful, you beings will become dull, foggy, and forgetful. By being unconscious and lazy, you will increase your ignorance, and the fruition of this ignorance will be to wander helplessly in the animal realm. Through Kuntu Zangpo's prayer, may you beings who have fallen into the dark pit of ignorance shine the light of mindfulness and thereby achieve wisdom free from thought. All you beings of the 3 realms are actually identical to Buddhas, the ground of all, but your misunderstanding of the ground causes you to go astray, so you act without aim. The 6 karmic actions are a delusion, like a dream. I am the primordial Buddha, here to train the 6 kinds of being through all my manifestations. Through Kuntu Zangpo's prayer, may all you beings, without exception, attain enlightenment in the state of Dharmadhatu. Ah ho! Hereafter, whenever a very powerful yogin with his or her awareness radiant and free from delusion recites this very powerful prayer, then all who hear it will achieve enlightenment within 3 lifetimes. During a solar or lunar eclipse, during an earthquake, or when the earth rumbles, at the solstices or the new year, you should visualize Kuntu Zangpo, and if you pray loudly so all can hear, the beings of the 3 realms will be gradually liberated from suffering through the prayer of the yogin, and will finally achieve enlightenment.
Chancho senjo remboje maje banan jijurje je ba nyam ba me ba yang kone kondon pe ba jo.
May Bodhicitta, the precious and supreme mind, arise in whom it has not yet arisen. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Remember this Thursday, our question and discussion period with Khenpo Tenzin. What is this? Thursday, March 18th. This will be on our Pacific Daylight Savings Time, which is actually Mountain Standard Time. So it's being written as Pacific Daylight Savings Time, so that makes it easier. But that is at 10 a.m. to noon on this Thursday, as we're alternating Thursdays. So hopefully we see you at 10 a.m. to noon, either in our YouTube or join us on our Zoom. Information is on our website at garchin.net. Thank you. Stay well and be safe.